Hey guys, in this tutorial we will be looking at how we go about customizing our views and our application's aesthetics to make it look more like our application as opposed to the auto-generated application given to us by ASP.NET. We can redesign our landing page as seen on the screen here, and we'll also look about what Bootstrap has to offer to expedite this process. Now before I move on, I need to remind you guys that we're using Bootstrap 3. The default Bootstrap that came with our project is Bootstrap 3. We can upgrade it to 4, but if we do that, then we run the risk of having to redo a lot of the work. So I recommend that we continue using Bootstrap. For Bootstrap documentation, we can go to their website, which is getbootstrap.com, or you can just look for Bootstrap 3 and Google will suggest it. And here we will be given all of the documentation behind all of the goodies that Bootstrap has to offer. We don't have to start from scratch, but I'll just take you through a quick tour to help you appreciate what Bootstrap brings to the table. Now, Bootstrap is a CSS framework. In a nutshell, the developers observed web development patterns over years and came up with a bunch of classes or CSS styles that they think people need. Further to that, they had a mobile first agenda. So using Bootstrap helps you to accomplish a mobile first and clean design as they would have packed it up with commonly used CSS styling. And I keep on saying this, but let me, for instance, look at tables. People always want tables. People always want their tables to not look quite like tables. Well, Bootstrap gave us a table class. All we have to do when creating a table is give the class equals table to our table code, and then it starts looking something like this. And if we recall, that's how our student and our courses tables look out of the box. You can also add striped properties. You can make it bordered. But the fact is that Bootstrap is making this very easy because you don't have to write all the CSS to accomplish all of these. They just add on the classes. Let's take a look at buttons. Last time we looked at changing how buttons look. So we saw that the buttons came with btn and then btn dash something. So you have btn dash default to get this default looking button. You have btn dash primary to get a blue button, success to get a green button, and everything. So it's all clearly outlined right here on their website. They give you the example and they give you the code for this example. And you need only translate that into your need and your specification so that you can go ahead and start using it. They support responsive images. Class img-responsive, that means that your image will start to resize and flex according to your screen size. All right, so you can peruse. I wouldn't recommend that you try committing it all to memory because it can be overwhelming. But as you have a need, if you want something to be red or blue or something, you can come on over. You can look through the CSS category, or you can go to the components category, which has even more things. You have space for alerts. All right, you have your danger alert versus your success alert. You have labels that you can add to text. In the JavaScript section, you have stuff for modals. If you want a pop-up that looks attractive, you have for tabs if you want a tab experience on your browser, and they give you the JavaScript. And if you recall, part of the scripts that would have been given to you with the project include a bootstrap.js, so you don't have any additional work to do but to incorporate this code with yours and utilize it to your own benefit. So I would advise you to look through, see what you need, and use it on demand. So for this section, we're going to actually restyle our landing page, we're going to actually add a few images and a Bootstrap slider to our homepage section right here. So we're going to rip out this entire gray section, and then we're going to replace it with a Bootstrap slider. I went ahead and got some pictures from pixabay.com. That's my go-to site for free high quality pictures. And I selected 3 pictures that I want to use. I'm going to use this one, Back to School, this one, Never Stop Learning, and this one. So with Pixabay, you need only go there, click free download, and then it will ask you to sign up and just verify that you're not a robot. And then once you click download, it will initiate the download for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the other 2. Now, having done that, I need to get them all into the project. I would have downloaded them to my desktop, and now I need to get them into my project for further use in my website. Now, I recommend you create a folder and you put all your images in that folder. As you can see, they give you a folder structure for all types of files. One file type that they may not have catered for is images. So I'll just go ahead in content. I think content is the best place to put images based on what's in there. I just say content, add, and new folder, call it images. And then I can right click images, click add, go to existing item. So if the item exists, meaning you're not going to use Visual Studio to create the item, but it's something that's already out there, like in this case, an image file, and you want to bring it over into your project, then you click existing item, and then you find it on your PC. So I put mine on my desktop. So I'll scroll through and find my image, and I found one here. I'll scroll and find the other 2, and I changed my mind with one of the images. Alright, and there they are added to my project. You can tell with the plus sign that they're now being incorporated into the project, and when you hover over each one, you'll see a mini preview of what this image is. Best practice, or for ease of use, you would use this long auto-generated name coming from the website. Now you want your image to be easy to use, so you want to rename it to something that's more appropriate for the purpose that you have it. So I want it for a slider, so I'll call this one slide-1, and the extension is .jpg, and I'll rename the other 2 accordingly. And now we have all 3 images that we need for our slideshow. So like I said earlier, the objective now is to change that gray area which would have been depicted by this Jumbotron div, and we want to put in a Bootstrap slider in that section. We can just head over to the Bootstrap website to see the documentation and get guidance as to how we do that. So I'll go to the JavaScript section and I'll look for carousel. That's what Bootstrap calls it, a carousel. And then they give you an example: first slide, second slide, third slide. As you can see, the clicking works. And then as you scroll down, you'll see that they give you a mountain of code that is required to have something looking like this. What they didn't give you are all the images, but you just need to look at this, appreciate it, and then modify it for your own purpose. So I'm going to just copy out all of this section of code, go back to our project, paste it here, and then it may look a bit overwhelming, but if you take the time out to appreciate it, if you know HTML, you'll see exactly what's going on here. But before anything else, let us take a preview of what the result is. So this is the preview of what we get. As you can see, it is much less attractive than what we had before, and we still have a bit of work to do, but we can see that we have our arrows, and actually clicking the arrows actually animates something that is visible. So let's go ahead and go back to Visual Studio and see what additional changes need to happen to make our carousel look presentable. So back in Visual Studio, looking at the code, you will see a breakdown for each section that should produce an image. All right. So firstly, you'll see that you have this ordered list, which has LIs, and it has some data target, and then you'll see that it has data-slide 2, 1, 2, 3. This one is tagged as active, so 0 will always be the default one. But then for the actual slides, you see that each slide appears in its own div. That's item number 1, and this is item number 2. And we know we have 3 items, so we just need to build on all of this sample code according to what we need. And then down here you'll see that they give us a section for the controls, which are 2 A tags using some Bootstrap classes here to look like arrows. And these are the arrows that go to the side for next and previous. So the first thing I'm going to do is modify the code for our first slider. So image, I'm going to set the source, change it from the ellipsis, and I can just use Control space to get that IntelliSense hinting. I remember I put my images folder inside of content, and then my image is inside the images folder, and I'll say slide 1. For the alternative text, I'll put we learn. For the caption, I can use a span tag and say we learn. For the second section, I'll do a very similar modification. So I'll change the SRC to slide 2. And change that to never stop. Now mark you, I'm just putting in some random captions and alternative texts. You would fill in yours more appropriately when you have your chance to do so. And then we have 3 sliders, so I'm just going to duplicate this one, remove this ellipsis, and change this to slide 3. I will come back and change these to more appropriate captions and alternative text, but I just want to show you guys how you go about putting in a Bootstrap slider. And we don't have to modify much else. And then we can preview that. And here we go. So now we have a slider in the space where we had that generated text. A few things that we can observe would be the varying heights for each image. So that causes the carousel to push and pull the content on the page. So you'd want to be mindful of that to ensure that your images are of the same dimensions. And so your content will look fairly consistent with each slider. So that is a preview of how you go about incorporating a Bootstrap component into your website. You do so at will and as you need to. You may not use a carousel, that's up to you, but you have quite a few options available to you. You can add tooltips, you can add tabs, you can add drop downs. And all of this comes out of the box with Bootstrap, and ASP.NET comes out of the box with Bootstrap. So unless you're going to find another framework that you may prefer, as you have a few out there, you can invest some time in experimenting with Bootstrap and seeing what it has to offer. Now, another thing that we want to accomplish is to modify this section to only have 2 options, one for courses and one for students. All right. So as we can see, we have 3 columns. And if we look in our code, we will see that we are using Bootstrap to divide our row. So Bootstrap will give you a construct called a row, similar to a table. And as you know, each table has columns. So Bootstrap has a grid system that once you have a row, you can divide it into up to 12 columns. And then further to that, you can specify how many columns should be present or how big a column should be based on the size of the screen. So the typical screen on any laptop or computer would be in the MB region. So they're giving you 3 columns once you're viewing it on a desktop. 1, 2, and 3. Now we only want 2, so I'm going to remove the third one. Now I'm going to modify this one, bearing in mind that we have up to 12 columns that we can use. So I'm going to change this one to 6 and this to 6. And once again, I know that I can do this because it was already outlined in the documentation. So you can always go to the documentation and read up on the grid system to have a better understanding of what is happening here. And then I'll go about changing the title or the caption that is being used here. So courses and students. I'll also change out this paragraph. I really don't need to be advertising ASP.NET on my school management system site. So I will write a nice paragraph. And then I don't need to be linking to an href all the way outside of my purview. So I'm going to change this to a button that will link to my courses page. So I can use my action link. So I'm going to have my @ sign and call for my HTML helper, create my action link. And then I want to print the text, learn more. I want this action link to go to index. And this index would be in my courses controller. And then I'm going to repeat that for the student section. Alright, so I made the adjustments. I added the student's caption, a paragraph for that section, and the action link. And then we can go ahead and preview this. So we see here that our changes have been put into effect, and we can see that we have an even split between the two. So remember, I was saying we have up to 12 spaces, 12 columns that we're able to use. And I said I wanted either one to be 6 of those 12. So we get courses taking up to 6, and we get students taking up to 6. So that's a nice, easy way to get things side by side. In traditional HTML, you'd have to use div, and then you float to the left, and then you try and set margins in between to make sure that they are, you know, a certain distance from each other. Bootstrap just gives you a grid system, and they say, put them side by side. Just tell me how big you want them, and I'll handle the rest. And this varying height for the pictures is kind of annoying, so I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to leave that to you to modify and find images that are consistent. Now, one other thing that we want to do is get our buttons back. We have links, but we want them to look like the buttons that were there originally. So I'm going to just go back over to the project, and we're going to add those Bootstrap classes. Now, from the earlier examples, you remember that we initialize a very generic object, and in this generic object we specify that we want attribute class, and then we add our values. So our values would be, according to Bootstrap's documentation, btn and btn dash whichever class we want. I want a blue button, so I'm going to say primary. And I'm going to do the same thing, just copy that for the students button, but I'm going to make this one be a lighter shade of blue, info, just so we have a little diversity, so we can refresh and see what that looks like. And there we go. So we see that our Bootstrap code works. We have our learn more looking like a button, and our students looking like a button also. And you know that they were both anchor tags. So Bootstrap allows you to style a typical anchor tag and make it look like a button. So go ahead and experiment with Bootstrap, experiment with making your website look cleaner than mine does at the very least, and adding styles, removing some of the default code and making it more personalized.